And I will repeat again that the department has not and would not prevent any employee who wants to tell their story to Congress from doing so.
Well, Stephen Yates is the former Deputy Assistant to the Vice President for National Security Affairs and the CEO of D.C. International Advisory. He joins us now to weigh in on this issue. What do you think is going on here?
Well, Kelly, there's been quite a long pattern of withholding information about the attack in Benghazi. I think most Americans by now are very familiar with the fact that we lost 4 distinguished Americans the night of the attack. But really what's astonishing is that probably very few know that there were 33 others evacuated. And we've heard so little about what their experiences were. They've had a few witnesses that were seen as whistleblowers come before Congress many, many months after the attack. But really, we just had a very slow drip, which seems to give an indication that there has been an effort to control information.
Yeah, you talk about the slow drip, and Congressman Frank Wolf is the one who's actually calling on the Obama administration to explain why these survivors that you've mentioned had to sign these non-disclosure agreements. He goes on to say, quote, if these records are accurate, would raise serious questions about additional restrictions the State Department has placed on those who have knowledge of what took place in Benghazi. Stephen, what are you hearing out there? Have you heard what these 33 people might say or might testify to before Congress?
I haven't been on the receiving end of what they have to say, but I'd count myself among many who would be very, very interested and find it really unusual, abnormal to have this much time transpire without having had some amount of witness testimony on this from people on the scene. You'd expect people who have proper clearances in executive and legislative branches of government to have been fully briefed. That apparently hasn't happened. And you'd think just with any average sampling of 33 Americans, by now someone would have talked.
And what do you know about what Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has talked about? He goes on to say that earlier this year, if you recall back in March, he was trying to get some information, and he was told that many of these 33 people have been told not to talk. They've been told to be quiet.
Right. Well, that's consistent with what the former Deputy Chief of Mission Hicks testified to, that when members of Congress were coming after the fact for information exploration and fact-finding, that they had received calls from the Secretary of State's Chief of Staff, among others, encouraging them to be circumspect in sharing information with members of Congress. And so there seems to be an effort to withhold that info.
Stephen, I want to ask you, what do you think the Obama administration has done here? Are they trying to cover something up as it relates to Benghazi?
Well, it's very unclear to me who the main actors would be, other than people who had a political stake in the story being told. The Department of State as an institution wouldn't have any interest at keeping this information going forward if it's about keeping diplomatic facilities safe. So it seemed to be someone with a political motive relatively high up, in my estimation.
So in the best interest of the country and in the best interest of the Obama administration, what should the White House be doing at this point?
Well, the White House ought to be making good on what these various spokesmen have been saying, that people who have something to say should feel free to step forward. But more than that, they should make them readily available to members of Congress who've been conducting an investigation. There have been several investigations Congress has been trying to conduct, seeking information that hasn't been forthcoming from the executive branch. This one really ought to be less controversial than it's been.
Yeah, and Stephen, we know already through some previous reports that there were systemic failures as it related to what happened there in Benghazi. So the White House has already admitted that. The State Department has admitted that. The CIA, everyone involved has admitted there have been systemic failures. What do you think the White House has been doing to clean up that mess?
Well, they tried to tightly control the narrative about what happened and why, and that's going to remain a controversy. It hasn't been undone. No, I think that's not the right thing to do. They haven't really put forward any kind of explanation for what the national interest was in keeping the truth from coming out a little bit more quickly. There was the timing of our national election that seemed to have been very sensitive and coincidental, but with the passing of the general election, we should have had more information faster.
Stephen Yates, we've got to end it there. We thank you for joining us. Stephen Yates, who is the CEO of D.C. International Advisory. Thank you for your perspective, sir.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Well, that will do it for us. I'm Kelly Wright.
I'm Jamie Colby. Great to have